Welcome in, guys. My name is Robbie. This is episode 2.2 of the Sharp Money Positive EV sports betting course. And today we're going to talk about a really important term to understand, and that is the Vigorish. Now, this term is also referred to as the VIG, the fee, the tax, the hold, the house edge, whatever you want to call it. It's basically the fee that the sportsbook charge the sports bettors to guarantee they make a profit long term. Now, the most obvious example here is when you see a sporting event priced at minus 110 on both sides of the line. That means the person wagering needs to place a $110 wager just to win $100 in return. This gives a pretty good edge to the sports book and allows them to make money long term. As a profitable sports bettor, I need to be placing bets that overcome the VIG. So my edges need to be more than the VIG that I'm going to pay on my winnings. If I simply win 51% of the time betting minus 110 lines, because I have to pay that extra VIG, winning more than half the time isn't going to be profitable. You actually need to win 52.38% of the time just to be profitable betting minus 110 lines, because the VIG on a minus 110 line is 4.76%. So simply winning 51% of the time is not going to be enough to be profitable because they are taking the tax away from you. The sportsbook's main goal is to produce a spread or a total that will win or lose 50% of the time, no matter what side you bet on it, right? Because if they're able to produce a really accurate spread or total that long term people are winning and losing 50% of the time on, and they're charging that 4.76% VIG, then they will end up making 4.76% in profit. So if they can maintain an accurate line, then they obviously will take in exactly what they charge for the tax. Now, we can kind of use this against the sports book because they, in certain markets, the sports book will add more VIG to their line. Like I said, minus 110 is 4.76. But if you see lines priced at minus 120, minus 120, the VIG is much higher. Meaning, if you're blindly betting into these markets, you're giving up a ton of extra VIG and taxes to them, right? But this also tells me that the sports book is not confident in their lines, that they need to set a really high percent of VIG to cover, the inaccuracy of their line. When it comes to spreads and money lines and totals, the VIG is usually pretty tight and pretty small because they're confident in producing that type of line. But if we're talking about an NBA player prop where it's a bench player to score over under a certain amount of points, the books aren't as accurate producing that line. So they have to add more VIG. So yes, it's harder to overcome the VIG there, but we know that market is exploitable because they are kind of showing a sign of weakness by adding more VIG into that market, basically saying, hey, we don't know exactly what this number should be set at. So we are going to raise our VIG percentage so that we have a little bit of a buffer room to be wrong on this one. In the last video, I talked about how top-down betting strategies often use sharp books to identify the fair value of a line and then compare it to other books. Now, a good indicator of a sharp book or a sharp market would be a low VIG percentage in that book or market. So, for example, there are three pretty sharp books. We'll get into this in much more detail, but Bookmaker, Circa, and Pinnacle, a lot of their mainline spreads and totals, they'll only charge minus 105 on each side of the line or minus 108 instead of minus 110 like FanDuel, DraftKings, Caesars, and all other retail books do. So that's a clear indicator that the markets are more accurate and tighter on the sharp books because they don't need that much VIG to make money, as in a retail book that needs to take a 4.67% hold to actually make a profit. In the first chapter of this course, we talked about how much money the sports books are actually making, and that's about 9.1% ROI on every dollar that is bet into their book. And you might ask yourself, hey, if they're only charging 4.76% VIG, how are they making over 9% profits? Well, it's because of the parlays. We talked about how parlays are growing in popularity but for the customers that are betting into the sports book. But essentially how a parlay works is if you are placing multiple wagers and banking on them all to hit, then you are just adding the VIG of each bet into this one wager. So for an example, if we're betting a money line parlay and each leg that we are adding, or each bet that we're adding, has a 5% VIG. If I build a 4-leg parlay, then I just added 4 separate bets together in this parlay that each bring a 5% VIG with them. So now this total bet, this total parlay has 20% VIG baked in there. So if I bet $100, I'm expected to only return $80 back. The sportsbook would make 20% on that wager long term. Now, obviously, with the mix of straight bets and parlays, that's where the 9.1% comes from. That's their rake. That's, the hold of the VIG that they collect from people betting into them. Let's look at a couple more markets and see the VIG percentage within these markets. Hopefully, by talking through this and explaining these numbers, you will look at the betting market completely different and hopefully never want to place a degenerate bet again just blindly into these markets because you know how much VIG is baked into them. So, like we said earlier, minus 110, minus 110 market, you're giving up 4.76%. Okay, that's reasonable. It's not crazy high. No big deal to place a few bets like that. You often will see these minus 115, minus 115 markets on player props. So that's the next one we're going to talk about. This is a 6.98% hold. Now this number is getting a little scary. I don't want to give up close to 7% of my money every time I bet. Now, obviously, this is only if you're betting without an edge and just blindly betting. We can bet into these markets with edges. You'll know how to, I'll explain how to do that later in the video. So you also see these minus 120, minus 120 markets. These could be on like of the Olympic events, like events that the books really have no idea what's going on. And you're giving up about a 9.1% edge by betting into these minus 120 markets. So scary numbers to give up that big of a percent of your money. If you place 10 wagers at minus 120, minus 120 markets, then you'll basically be broke by the time your 10 wagers are settled, which is kind of insane. But I just wanted to show you guys how much VIG is actually baked into some of these markets, even if the difference between minus 110 and minus 120 doesn't scare you. It really should. It's a big difference. In the next video, we're going to talk about the implied win probability that a set of odds tells us. Now, just like a set of odds tells us the certain VIG percentage in that market, it also tells us the win probability that a sportsbook is assigning to a certain bet, which is extremely useful when it comes to profitable sports betting. In the next couple of videos, we'll also go into how to calculate the VIG, how to calculate the implied win probability, and no VIG fair odds and things like that. And we can finally break out this whiteboard and put it to the test. So click on the next video to learn more about the implied win probabilities.